Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'm gonna do today, I'll be talking about waste and water tracking. I'll be teaching you guys this from a Trailhead because Trailhead has better documentation, and I don't want to, copy that to slide. It's the same thing, anyways, right? And so yeah, this is just an introduction about what I mean by waste and water tracking from a net zero cloud perspective, and from a general perspective as well, right? If you're running a company, so as you know that, right, waste do produce carbon emissions, right? So let's start with the waste, right? I mean, we can talk about the water. So if you look at the waste, right, that there are three kinds of waste. Usually, you might be very familiar with, right? One is the fossil biogenic waste, which is right, a burning of the fossil fuel. Um, you know, the car combustion, the gas that comes out of it, which is usually carbon dioxide, and then the landfill waste, right? So, for instance, your house waste, right? You normally in New Zealand, what happens is that, right? So you throw every week. I mean, depending. I mean, mostly in every city, right? You buy a council bag, right? And in that council bag, you fill in your household waste, right? Could be leftover from the food and all kind of stuff, right? House waste. Just don't want to get into details, but you got a 40 liters bag or 60-liter bag, right? You fill in it, and then so depending upon the day of the week and the city you live in, you just put the rubbish bag outside your house near the curb, and the waste management truck will pick that up in the next day, early morning or whatever time, right? So that's for the household waste, and these household waste get dumped into a landfill area, and obviously, sometimes they burn it. So sometimes I don't know what to do with it, but because these are not recycled waste, right? This is just rubbish from the house, right? Could be, like I said, right, food and other stuff, right? Leftovers people want to throw, and then these landfill waste uh, do release, different gases, right? Usually, methane, that's CH4, and which is not really good for the environment, right? And so that is from a waste perspective, right? So, and then we have recycle bins, right, where you put your recycled products, right? You put your plastic milk bottles, or maybe something which can be recycled, right? And which is, and remember one thing, right? In especially in my city, right? You can't put your bottles inside the recycle bin. That's a separate day in a week for glass bottles, where you put only the glass bottles and keep it out. Someone will collect it, and perhaps they go into separate recycling center, right? But normally this one, right? Your plastic boxes, or maybe your pizza box, perhaps. And there are certain things, right? I mean, if you are interested, you can go to the New Zealand um, website about the waste management. It talks about different things you can recycle. That's not the point of discussion, but just wanted to give you context, right? So, um, what I'm coming at is, right, the waste, right? The waste which the dumps in the landfill releases a lot of methane gas, which is not really good for the environment. So the government is coming up with a different initiative, right? The council is doing something where they will have separate uh, options for certain kind of waste and separate options for recycled waste, right? So this way we can work towards reducing the carbon dioxide and methane pollution, right? Um, then we have a lot of other industry waste, like disposal of your refrigeration, air conditioning units, right? Obviously, there are a lot of leftover products, or when the things get old, like your refrigerator get old, or freezer gets old, or other stuff gets old, you dump it out, right? So certain place, not dump it out. I mean, there's a processing unit which. When I said dumping out, you dump at the processing unit, right? Not dumping out in the landfill. So they do some processing behind, and that releases the, hydrofluorocarbons, which is not really good for your health. It's not really good for the environment as well. Okay, so these are the factors which really contributes to the climate change, right? And people, uh, who says that, who skeptics, who are not convinced that we skeptics, right? Who are not convinced that we have an issue with the climate change. They have to look at the data. They have to look at the stats. They have to look at the research that's done by climate scientists, right? Someone who holds PhD degrees, right? They're not someone just from nowhere, start researching. They are very educated, credible scientists, right? Coming with the factual data. And if you don't trust that, then unfortunately, right, you are part of a problem then. I mean, I do understand that it sounds rude, but after having all the factual data, if you find it hard to believe, then I don't know what will make you convinced to believe it, right? If a person like me speak about it, right, you would say, hey, you're not a climate scientist, right? Yeah, I agree, right? So you don't have to believe me, but you can obviously follow your government data prepared by climate scientists, right? So, okay, sorry, digress. So this is the waste management. So now, as a company, right, you wanted to track it and so that you can prevent it. So how you do that in net zero, we have something called waste management option where you can actually keep track of your the carbon emissions due to waste, which is a pretty fantastic option. I'll show you how you can do that, and there are different calculations behind the scene. If you remember when I started this course, right, I talked about loading a data set option, right, where you can load data set from different place, right? So there's a common option under setup, right, where you can say load all the data set, will load it. So there's a data set for waste management, which emission factor. So emission factor, single unit and emission factor. We'll look into that, right, in the next episode. So that comes in handy when you're trying to calculate the waste, right, emission. So that's from a waste perspective. I hope that's clear. Then we have a water perspective, right? The water waste. Now you must be thinking, oh, the water waste, what this guy is talking about, right? You do understand, right? We live in a planet, although it's a lot of water, right? But 97 of the water is not, you can't drink it. It's a seawater. You can't go near the ocean and, see starting. It's too salty. Yes, in the countries like, for instance, Israel, right? They have an option where they can extract the fresh water from the sea, and then the whatever the waste they get out of it, they make some kind of facial products, the creams and kind of stuff, right? I mean, I lived in Israel, so I remember I many years ago I spoke to somebody about it. Sorry if you're hearing a noise. There's a construction work going behind my house, but neighbor been hammering. I don't know what the heck he's doing in his garage, but whatever. Okay, yeah, it is annoying, the noise. I hate it, but unfortunately I can't do anything. Okay, so 2.5% is importable fresh water, which means that that is available in the form of glaciers and the things which is like in Antarctica. There are a lot of glaciers, right, in form of ice, and only 0.5% is available, right? And if you waste so much of water, and most of the people on the planet won't be available fresh water. Look at certain parts of the world, right? People have to travel miles to get the water. And then there are certain parts of the planet where people just constantly waste water for all the stuff, right? Which is not really great, that means we as a human are not responsible, right? That's being selfish, right? Because you have to think, right? You have to use the water what is essential for you, right? I mean, no one says not to use anything, but you have to use it. It's water is a commodity if you think about it that way, right? Because we don't have enough fresh water. I mean, you can build it, but the cost of extraction, right? It's not cheap. You have to understand that. I mean, if you have an option where we can, convert the entire seawater to fresh water, that would be great. But then, on what cost, right? Will it impact something else by doing so? How much carbon emission we are looking at, how much methane emission we are looking at, how much other gas emission we are looking at doing the processing of converting the seawater to fresh drinking water, right? So some companies, right, especially the textile industry, they manufacture clothes, right? Obviously, which is pretty simple for everyone to understand. Now they use dye, color. So obviously the color get mixed into the water, right? And obviously people are not using seawater to make, to wash your clothes or um, um, clean your clothes and when mixing with the dye and kind of stuff, right? They use the fresh water. And 20% of the world fresh water get wasted by textile industries. There's the stats around it, which is a pretty big number, right? 20% of the freshwater, world freshwater is used by textile industry, which is insane, right? And what happens, that's why I tell people don't go and buy fancy clothes when you get bored, right? Because your action is impacting our climate change. Wear whatever clothes you want, wear fancy clothes you want, but then after wearing it, you're just gonna go and dump it somewhere, and that will act as a non-recycling stuff. It will, a lot of things you can't recycle, right? And it's not biodegradable. Like plastics are not biodegradable. I mean, if you dump the plastic in the ocean, it will stay inside the ocean floor for thousands of years, right, without getting biodegraded. So that's why there was a study. I think it's a study done by Massachusetts Institute of Technology. One of the scientists that mentioned that if our race get extinct, right, for whatever reason, let's say, because of our own mistake, and if thousands of years down the line, if the human has to start from Stone Age, and if they have to find out whether there was a race before their race, they have to look under the ocean surface to find the plastics. That will tell us the industrial revolution what we had. Now, the same argument you could have used. Okay, what can we find advanced civilization, right? Well, maybe your technology is not too advanced to find at the right place. Maybe you're looking at the wrong place. So that's all I can say. Right. So sorry, I digress, but I just wanted to mention that, right? Impact of the water waste. And if you are a company, right, let's to wanted to track the water waste, you can do that using Net Zero Cloud. There is an option there. You can uh, keep track of it. It's very important. And if you wanted to reach net zero by 2030 or by 2050 or whatever realistic expectation you guys have, right? It's important to pay attention to your emission factor, right? And once you understand there's a problem, you will work on a solution, right? So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about in today's episode. It's a theory. I understand that. In the next episode, we're going to look at some of the options how you can use inside the Net Zero Cloud to track the waste and the water. Okay. So that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing Sunday. Adios.